And one of the biggest problems that we run into when think about the use of surveillance tech in local communities is that government often does not come to citizens first and ask for permission to use this stuff, even though it like impacts all of us, right? So practically, no, I think people generally don't know the details of how they're surveilled.
You just touched on something really important. Even our lawmakers were shocked to find out we already had these cameras in our city and that they're up and running, and they have no idea what these cameras are capable of doing.
I was just curious on it. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a great thing, but I didn't know we already were moving forward on it. So.
Automated license plate readers, which we call ALPRs for short, which I'll probably use here. They're cameras that capture the movements of cars and upload their location to a searchable, shareable database. We've been seeing them sort of adopted in different jurisdictions around the country, by the government and, with sort of controlled by police departments, but we've also seen them adopted in various like homeowner associations, for example, and sort of private groups are also putting these up. This data is gathered pretty indiscriminately. It tracks the movements of millions of ordinary citizens, depending on where you are, who have just absolutely no connection to a crime whatsoever. And depending, if a jurisdiction puts up enough of them, say all over the city, it could basically create a sort of day-to-day record of everyone's movement as they go around the city.
Yeah, it seems unconstitutional, and like a lot of things now are becoming things that aren't covered in this 200-year-old document, right? It's like, were you ever going to think that flock cameras were going to track our every movement? Not just flock cameras, every camera, right? So like if my HOA wants to take their real-time camera up front and tie it into Goodyear real-time crime center, they can do that, right? And they can track people that way. Yeah. Were the framers of the Constitution ever thinking that? No, not really. That's why they created the Fourth Amendment, right? So and the Fourth Amendment, very broad, covers a lot of things, but you're like, oh wow, yeah, we need this amendment.
For the person who says, I have nothing to hide, it's okay, you can put as many cameras up as you want, I have nothing to hide, what do you say to that person?
An automated license plate reader is using kind of low-grade artificial intelligence to turn a picture of your license plate into the digits on the plate and log that. Any kind of image recognition tool has an error rate. We don't have good information on what the specific error rates are for flock, but field testing of license plate readers puts the error rate somewhere between 10 and 30%, which is pretty high. That you can be in a very high risk situation without knowing about it.
According to a police report, the officer received a flock alert for a stolen vehicle.
So there was recently an incident where a gentleman was flagged for having a stolen plate in a car that was not stolen, and police approached his car, guns drawn.
What did y'all put me over for?
Brandon Upchurch case. Black man who was flagged for having a stolen plate eventually was attacked by a police dog, and then arrested for resisting arrest after the police realized that his plates were proper, and that there had been like a camera error. And that, like, obviously that has an impact that falls harder on Black and brown communities, but that can happen to anyone, right? Like having a policeman approach your car with a gun drawn is a dangerous situation that things can go wrong, right? So that's a very concrete harm. And then like once you are in the system, it is very hard to stop down the line consequences from happening, right? An arrest on your record, even if it gets expunged, is going to show up on your like search history databases. Like arrest record databases are notoriously not very good about removing people who are wrongfully arrested. So a small error, license plate misread can lead to a lot down the line consequences for years, even if you have nothing to hide and you feel like you're comfortable with people knowing where you are. It's one of those things where, I don't like to talk about bad apples generally, but like one bad apple with the ability to tell where you are anywhere is really scary.
So tell me a little bit about how did you start looking into flock cameras being used in the West Valley?
Great question. So you know, I went to graduate school a little late in life, and I did a story on policing and how they use social media, and that really, introduced me to a segment of the ACLU that really focused on surveillance, and they do it through a lens of minority communities, but it's an everybody issue, right?
And it could be used in conjunction once we, talk about the plan on how those cameras want to be utilized. But they will look at specifically be able to see license plates. So to be able to relay that information back to the real-time crime center and then thus to our officers. We are looking into as another strategic plan action item as far as recording and the legalities of what you can and can't record. So that's all part of this whole conversation.
Okay. I imagine it's like people warrants, stolen vehicles, human trafficking, or maybe even we use them for, I don't know, the different alerts, Amber alerts and things like that, I imagine. Is it speeding too?
It would read the license plates of those vehicles, so red light runners.
Or like get them if they're red light
Well, we would be able to capture their license plate. Now we can't tell who's driving at that point, so.
You just know that someone's speeding. You can't do anything about it necessarily.
I'll leave that to the law enforcement.
I'm just asking. So we're not for the public. We're not putting in red light running cameras.
No.
So in the city of Goodyear.
No.
But we're putting in things that'll we'll know who's speeding essentially.
Here in Arizona, the people do not like their red light cameras. We used to have red light cameras everywhere in the cities, all over the state. Now they're gone. Lawmakers will say, when you slow down the traffic, you save lives. And then you have people who say, look, this is an infringement on my constitutional rights and my privacy. How do these AI-driven cameras and this technology, how does that compare to your basic red light or traffic cameras?
Yeah, so I think that your sort of generic use automated license plate reader, like a flock camera, is more privacy invasive because it is recording every person who drives by.
Can you please tell us, what do these flock cameras, what can they do?
Yep. So flock has two basic features. One is that the police department can hot list cars. So for a set of identified license plates, they can put them into the system and then get real-time alerts when one of those cars drives by a flock camera. There are not necessarily controls on who gets put into that database, right? It could be reserved for like serious violent criminals. It could be everyone who has an unpaid court fee. And it could be like activists, ordinary people, someone who just pisses off a police officer. Without oversight, there's no limits functionally on who gets put on that list.
It could basically create a sort of day-to-day record of, everyone's movement as they go around the city. To clarify, that the readers capture not just the license plate numbers, but also images of the car, which can include, who is in the car. So there can be, you can go out in public in a city with ALPRs and have images of who you're traveling with, where you're going, where you live, where you work, where you worship, if you attend a political rally, or we've seen them come up, they've been putting ones up around, say, gun shows, for example. And they're really just theoretically supposed to be there to prevent crimes. But in reality, just collecting thousands of plates per minute and sort of radically transforming of what it means to leave the home and pursue your private life and not have anyone watching you while you go do that. Maybe you trust the government not to use that against you, but do you always trust that? What happens if an administration changes and your political stance becomes unpopular? Then there's an entire surveillance network that already exists and is already a tool at the government's disposal.
Sure, Art Miller is leaving in less than a year, but who's gonna be that new guy in there, right? In charge of flock. There's no real incentive. Okay, the incentive is to lower crime, I get it. But man, has the last 10 years been crazy? Hasn't it been?
Who would have known that pandemic would have allowed all this to happen?
Yeah, just deteriorate our rights, but also technology is just taken off. We're okay, yeah, I guess we have AI now that can create images off of a sentence that I make. in perfect detail. Okay, I guess they can create videos off the sentences I make now. You know, it's pretty crazy. We're gonna have drones flying, delivering packages.
The second thing that Flock does is it records every person who is driving by the camera and then keeps those records in a database for some period of time. It might be 30 days, it might be a year, that's contractually determined. And then the police can go back in time and access that data and see who is driving in and out of the city, who is at a particular intersection. And by default, that information is not just accessible to your local police department, but every police department who has a contract with Flock.
But these cameras store information forever. Is that correct?
So that's like a contractual issue with Flock, right? The picture itself is probably less important than the piece of data generated off of it. So even if they delete the picture in like 24 or 48 hours, if they have your license plate tagged to a location, that sits in a database. The specific policies are going to determine when that's deleted. I know in Virginia, we've had contracts that set it at 30 days. But Flock certainly has an interest in making that period as long as possible because they can profit off the data.
How do they
And
profit
it
off
becomes
the
part of their well, it becomes part of their marketing pitch is that when you make a contract with Flock, you're not just getting, this license plate data for your municipality, but access to a broader database.
Could this technology eventually be used to start tracking people where they're going? If we were to have another pandemic, could you say, hey, Jen, we saw you go to XYZ location and now we need you to be in quarantine? I mean, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist at all, but is this how this could potentially be used in the future?
So Flock data is certainly used for location tracking, right? That's what it does. It's creating a record of your movements around a city. It's less precise than the location tracking on your phone, but that doesn't mean that it can't be used to follow you around, identify like your driving patterns, potentially patterns of your life, right? If you have a Flock camera outside your church, it's pretty easy to determine when you go to church. If you have a camera that logs more or less when you're coming home, if you have a data breach, all of a sudden a criminal who's like looking to rob your house has a pretty good indication of what your history is, your movement patterns, when you might be out of the house. So I think that sort of regardless of what your safety concerns are, location tracking is something that is very easy to abuse and was like very often harmful.
What is this Flock real-time crime center? So it could take any camera. So it has the Flock cameras, yes, but it has the ability to take any camera into the real-time crime center. I don't know if you saw Minority Report, right? It was called Pre-Crime is what they had, and they had a real-time pre-crime center, right? Well, that's what some of these monitoring centers are doing. They're creating, they're predicting what is suspicious behavior and criminal behavior. So you have this. There's already this story on some of the things that schools are rolling out, and I have that posted somewhere on the Goodyear Independent. But what it does, what the ACLU says it does is like it adversely affects minority populations because some of their mannerisms, how they walk, this is like also what they see in the community where there's high crime and all this stuff. So, I mean, we put garbage into AI, and then garbage is going to come out. There's no way you can put nothing but pure drinking water into AI, right? Yeah. There's going to be garbage that gets in there. Like, okay, this guy's doing a crip walk. When a kid in high school is doing a crip walk, he's just having fun. He's dancing. He's doing a TikTok video, right? Two different scenarios, but AI, all it knows is that until you program it differently. And who knows? They may not want to program it differently. Maybe that's something they want to target. And it totally depends on who's in power at that time, right? Who's in power of the legislature? Is it going to be who's in power in law enforcement? Is it going to be Sheriff Joe Arpaio, or is it going to be Art Miller, right?
The way I see it
these license plate readers and these cameras are just part of the essential infrastructure that you need to start building it, and we need to start. So let's just do that.
I really want to try and be fair in my reporting. It's really, really important to me that I do that. So what are some positives about AI?
AI technology, sort of smart city technology, would say within the realm of license plate readers, which would be all sorts of sort of tech that's used in cities to sort of measure, say that we see things that are used to measure traffic flow or measure, the amount of electricity used. And there can be, say like positive city effects to using that technology, or, positive environmental effects to measuring, maybe we can dim the lights here or not. I think that the framework that EFF likes to say for all of these is, you should go in with a privacy first mindset. And before you adopt this new technology, instead of on the back end trying to make all sorts of privacy measures, just from the get-go, pass it with oversight, pass it with privacy protections already built in. Have the companies that you are partnering with build their technology in a way such that it is just measuring the traffic patterns instead of sometimes that, also collecting audio or something. You know what I mean? Like there is a way that you can use and really benefit from like the exciting developments we've made in technology while still being mindful of, everyone's privacy around you.
It's important to me that I'm fair in my reporting. So I want to ask you, what are the benefits of AI? What are the good things? I need some positive things. Are there any positive things about AI?
Yeah, AI is a tool. You can use it well and you can use it poorly. So AI for like advanced medical research, it can be very powerful and helpful, right? I think the basic question is, are you using AI to sort of build out the base of human knowledge, things like research, or are you using it as an excuse for human decision making? In which case, it's putting a fig leaf over a problem that has already existed, or it's making that problem worse.
Very interesting. Well, I really enjoyed talking with you today.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jen.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Take
Bye.
care.